Everyone. Welcome to the Supply Chain Talk. I'm Anna Maria Velica and I'm your host today. It's a green episode, and this is the final one on 2025. So thank you for making time in this festive, busy season. Thank you for diving in. Uh, on here and on LinkedIn. And please, as you know, if you engage with us and you ask questions, you can win this beautiful Supply Chain Talk mug, which will be couriered by my colleagues at Business Reporter. The green episode today is From Data to Action, Harnessing Supply Chain Insights for Climate Progress. And I have panelists, distinguished experts across continents. So please engage with us. We have a breaking news in relation to climate progress or not. And I would like to see the questions coming. So please engage with us. Our first panelist is Sophie Taylor, Head of EMEA Planning at Spectrum Brands Limited. Hello, Sophie. If you can please turn on your camera and your mic.
Hi, Anna. How are you?
Good. It's good to have you here again, Sophie.
Thank you.
A few words about Sophie. Sophie is a strategic and collaborative supply chain leader with over a decade of experience across high growth businesses and global organizations. Sophie specializes in demand and supply planning, S&OP, and turning complex challenges into data-driven solutions. She's passionate about traveling. My second panelist is a former colleague of mine, and I'm very glad to invite you to the Supply Chain Talk, Ben Thornton-Jones.
Hi, nice to be here. Thanks for having me.
It's good to have you here, Ben. A few words about Ben. Ben is former director of sustainable supply for Haleon. Ben has over 2 decades of experience across supply chain and procurement, working for companies such as Nestle and GSK. Ben is a self-confessed supply chain geek and hosts the Supply Geek podcast, which reveals the hidden supply chain and challenges behind everyday goods from chocolate to batteries and many more. Yeah, you are doing a great job with the podcast, Ben.
Thank you.
My third guest and panelist is Jean-Marie Coant. Hello, Jean-Marie.
Hello, good afternoon.
It's good to have you here, Jean-Marie. A few words about Jean-Marie. He's a senior sustainability expert at Amfori, has been working on the environmental impacts of products and manufacturing processes for nearly 2 decades. Jean-Marie also tries to travel sustainably when he can and loves that Brussels offers many options to explore Europe by train. Amazing. So we have a masterclass. This is how I call it. So please engage with us and ask questions. And as you know, the format of our talk show kicks off with a news item. And our producer, if you open the chat box, our producer is posting the link in real time. It's a breaking news. On Monday, EU closed deal to slash green rules in major win for von der Leyen deregulation drive. And this news item, just a few highlights, talks about the major victory for European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen and announcing that more than 80% of Europe's companies will be freed from environmental reporting obligations after EU institutions reached a deal on a proposal to cut green rules. And this is controversial because we are seeing the global warming. We are seeing, the harm we are supply chain are making and are impacting environment. We see green and civil society groups arguing this backtracking would put environmental and human health at risks. So I would like to invite for your thoughts, Sophie.
Yeah, thank you. I think you summed it up perfectly with saying it's controversial. I think it's been branded as like a simplification effect and to make things easier and to, like you said, to reduce the burden potentially on companies. But I think the biggest challenge for me and sort of share that second opinion that you said was around sort of lack of accountability and where do we then lie on that? There's been so much positive work on visibility and it becoming sort of strategic objectives for a lot of companies, and it's been huge steps forward. It does almost feel like it's a step back. Personally, I feel in the incorrect direction. I think one positive which may come out of this though is it can then also almost become a bit of a USP for those companies who genuinely do want to be more sustainable and really drive that progress forward. I think sometimes it became a bit of a token gesture, whereas this now probably removes the regulation, it removes the necessity to probably highlight some of those emissions, and this then really sort of clears the path then for those who really do care about it and gives them the platform to really showcase the great work that they're doing. So it is controversial. I personally don't think it's a great initiative to have been passed, but I do think there can be positives coming from this, and it's really important that we do keep on talking about it.
Exactly. It comes with benefits, but also very controversial given the health and the health of our kids and families. Ben, what's your take on this news item?
Yeah, I guess I have mixed feelings on it. So, we are living in very turbulent times in the world, especially in terms of business markets, tariffs. We can go on about what's happening, and the backbone of this and why the EU made this ploy was off the back of the work around wanting to be the EU to be competitive. I recommend anyone. There was a Mario Draghi report about EU competitiveness, where a lot of this sort of came from. And, the EU does have to be competitive against the growing markets in India, China, and the US. And, a lot of markets are really struggling. I've had firsthand experience of working in large companies that are spending millions of pounds, dollars with consultants preparing for legislations and also working in the sustainability space. I definitely saw how, overburden on regulation, red tape, reporting was really starting to show the level of effort put more into reporting and proving what you've done rather than progressing and spending your funds on progressing your journey even further. It still applies for the world's largest companies that are within the EU region, so we'll catch those. And as Sophie said, may well be a USP, and a lot of large companies do tend to drive the market. But the final thing I'd say, and I'd add to this, another legislation which people may know about, which is the EU deforestation regulation. Companies, big or small, they want standardization and they want commitment. I think the flip-flopping back and forth between do you need to do it, do you not need to do it, is not helpful to any companies either. So if this is the way forward that they're going to go, EU, please stick with it so companies can get on with the good work and also adhere to the regulations.
Thank you. Thank you, Ben. Jean-Marie, what's your take on?
Yeah, I mean, I also agree that, of course, this is a very mixed feelings after this announcement. Maybe the good thing is that we have some certainty. At least we had much less uncertainty than a few weeks ago. So that's good because, of course, like companies, our members, but also other companies like to know where they're going. So this is welcome that finally this simplification or clarification went somewhere, and then we have kind of a result. Also, we like the fact that the due diligence system is kept, the principles are kept with a risk-based approach. So that's really good. Also to focus where you really companies need to focus first to tackle the sustainability challenges in their supply chain. So that's good. But when you think about, for example, climate, which is also the topic of the day, and the removal of the climate transition plan provision from the CSDDD, so the due diligence directive, I think this is really a missed opportunity because it would have been the possibility to create a level playing field, to at least helping creating one for companies. And yes, it's true that it will be a USP for companies being more advanced or more ambitious. And then, yeah, I talk to a lot of employee members, and I don't see any pushback or any withdrawal or a reconsideration of their climate targets. I mean, they continue in the good direction, especially the ones who, for example, are committed to science-based targets. But I think that a lot of other companies might be a bit discouraged to act. And then in terms of leverage, I mean, really changing the big picture, then this is really, I think, yeah, a missed opportunity and probably a much lower impact than what it could have been.
Thank you, Jean-Marie. And we all agree it's controversial, it's disappointing, and it's slowing down the efforts of some of the companies. Sustainability comes with a cost, with effort. We have experts, all of us, experts supporting clients, supporting companies, working with companies on accelerating sustainability in supply chain. And before we go into the three topics, this regulation, this breaking news and the new law, you said something, Ben, it's still applicable for large organizations. Now the reporting rules will only apply to companies with more than 1,000 employees and 450 million in net turnover, while only the largest companies with 5,000 employees and at least 1.5 billion in net turnover are covered by supply chain due to diligence obligations. Let's go into the first topic because controversial or not, supply chain leaders, they have a responsibility to drive scope 3 emissions reductions through smarter supply chain data. And we know data is at the core of everything. Sophie, how, in your expertise, in your experience, what's your view? How do we drive scope 3 emissions reductions?
I think in the intro, one thing that you picked out is I like to kind of try and bring a bit of clarity and simplicity to areas that often have complexity. And I think this isn't any different to that. And for me, you can't reduce what you can't see. And I think sometimes as well, you get caught up in trying to get all the tick boxes and trying to collate as much data as you possibly can. But in my experience in these things, the quality is better than quantity. So ensuring that you are tracking the correct metrics, ensuring that what you're getting is of good clarity, and your suppliers are on side as well. The majority of the scope 3 emissions are from your suppliers. So how can you work with them so they're not then having to do tick box exercises and work what works for them? Can you come up with a standardized template? How are they doing it with other companies? It's not just you, they're probably filling in this for multiple people. So how can we lean in and support them to make sure that we're making their job easier, which therefore makes you get better data, which then means you can then drive better decisions. So I think for me, it's around quality over quantity. And also having those open conversations. I think sometimes people just don't understand. So ensuring that we're educating, especially in other countries, of the importance, what our values are, why we're trying to do certain things, and bringing them on that journey as well. It needs to be a partnership and a collaboration, and that's how you tend to get the buy-in. So they're probably the key things for me of making sure that we're really working on the same page in the same way, in the easiest way possible to ensure we get that contribution.
I love it, Sophie. And without collaboration, we cannot change, we cannot move the needle.
Exactly.
Ben, I know you are a supply chain geek and you love supply chain, you love procurement. Tell us in your expertise, in your experience, how do you help companies drive measurable scope 3 emissions reductions using smart data?
Yeah, I mean, it's, data really is the key. When my experience of, the companies that I've worked for, but this goes for any of our suppliers as well, the first thing to do is to measure your carbon footprint. You have to understand because carbon is being emitted right across your value chain, but we only have a level of effort that we can put into each area. So you've got to go for where you get the most bang for your buck. So, when you map the supply chain and you map your value chain and you get your carbon footprint, as Sophie said there, most people, the biggest carbon footprint sits in their scope 3, which is generally, and then the majority in the upstream part of their supply chain. So it does mean working with suppliers. So, first of all, just knowing that means that you can start to place your efforts into the right area where you can tackle most of your carbon footprint. The other thing that I've seen as well is, after we mapped our carbon footprint, for every ton of, I don't know, plastic you're buying, you can get a industry standard level of emissions for that. But that secondary data, the thing that you really need to move to next and engage with your suppliers is go and speak to your 4, 5, 6, 7, however many plastic suppliers you have, because each of them, depending on where they are, depending on how progressed they are on their carbon reduction journey, will have a very different carbon footprint also. So you need to gather this data. But again, to Sophie's point as well, that ask that you go out to needs to be standardized. You need to help suppliers. There are many platforms out there. It's quite a littered market with technology platforms that are offering this service, but no one's really become the critical mass, the sort of Dun & Bradstreet, if you like, of the carbon measurement world. Therefore, you do have suppliers saying to you, look, I'm being asked by 8 different customers to put information on 8 different formats and platforms and asking slightly different things. So standardization is really, really key. And this is being done in pockets through a lot of collaboration between certain industries. I come from the pharmaceutical sector, where industry collaborations there were being done with the pharmaceutical industry groups to standardize what they're asking of their suppliers, targets, expectations, and then even things like the Science-Based Target Initiative. That is really key. And I think for many suppliers and companies, it's a first step to make a commitment, and then it has guidance on how you plan that journey out to actually make those reductions.
Thank you, Ben. As you see, we have lots of questions, so keep the questions coming. I will pick up one and I will share it with the panel. So we discussed about, and thank you, Sophie and Ben, we discussed about the quality of data. It's instrumental to have quality of data. We discussed about collaboration. Without collaboration with our customers, with our suppliers, because we talk about scope 3, so it's upstream. Without having this strong collaboration and transparency, we cannot achieve clear, tangible, practical scope 3 emission reduction. And Ben, you talked about the baseline. We need baseline and we need standardization through onboarding suppliers on EcoVadis, SEDEX. These are, very well-known platforms. What's your expertise in driving scope 3 emissions reduction, Jean-Marie?
So yeah, first I completely agree with what was said before about the data being really instrumental and key. And the thing is, quality is important. So nobody could really deny this, but I think the quantity is also something important. And then that's not really, of course, an easy balance, because I agree that you really need to have metrics to be able to know where to act first. So I think you need to start collecting a lot of data, maybe at low cost. So self-declarations can be, for example, a good way to massify the collection of data, to at least have an idea, take the temperature of where the big emissions come from in your supply chain. And then when you see that you have the biggest challenges or the biggest consumptions or the biggest issues, then you maybe send an auditor, or you have a training program, or you have more specific actions. But so if you target quality first, then it cannot be really massive, I think, in terms of quantity, and then you may miss things. So always the trade-off between both is not an easy one. But then we try to start with maybe quantity, and then target towards quality as soon as possible, even if the first one could also be good quality ones, if possible, of course. So that's one thing. And regarding the platforms, it's true that this is also something we hear, right, from factories we talk to, or also companies we talk to, our members, that you have several platforms. You have our platform, you have the ones you mentioned, and then it's sometimes tiring for factories to answer all this. So at least the collaboration in our case exists very much between members, like by having one questionnaire, one type of audit, one type of assessment that applies for all the buyers or many buyers of one factory. So that's also saving some time, even though I think they still have to answer all the questionnaires from other buyers, maybe in other sectors. So that's not perfect, but at least there is an attempt to limit a bit the burden for factories in terms of providing data.
Yeah, so masterclass, ladies and gentlemen. So please note everything. It's for you. We have loads of questions. I will pick up the first question from Daniel. And I will address it to you, Sophie. What incentives, commercial, contractual, or reputational, actually work to encourage suppliers to invest in lower carbon processes?
I think going back to what I think a lot of us have said is it's around collaboration and making it a partnership. I think if it's a one-way process, these things don't often work, or they're quite short-lived. So whether you can work on that with them around whether it's promotion or giving additional business or various things, or actually can you then do joint partnerships where you work together? I personally find they work much better. I think it goes back to that reputational point of brand reputation are so important, and that is brand of both the suppliers and the actual brand. So to say that you've got a success story, people love to see that. They love to see the journey, what you've done, how you've worked together and brought ideas from sort of the boardroom into reality. Being able to sort of bring that to life and really showcase what you've done, I think goes a really long way. From sort of a contractual point of view, I in the past have had contracts in there where we've got to achieve X, which then means Y. I think that works, and sometimes they need that additional carrot to kind of just
Yes.
get things moving along. But personally, and that this is just sort of my way of working in general, I think people need to want to do that as well. So incentives are great. I think it's a challenge when it's a cost to do it. So often it costs more to work in that way. That is obviously a challenge, especially for smaller businesses. But I honestly think the main incentive is reputation and want to improve the planet, to improve the world that we live in, and the desire to actually progress.
Thank you, Sophie. I will
Anna,
address.
can I add one thing to that just
Of
quickly?
course, of course.
I completely agree with Sophie. It's sort of it's always that, you get that challenge from suppliers saying, this is going to cost, but there are huge amounts of opportunities now, and they're growing all the time, where you can have a win-win on cost and carbon reduction. You have certain markets like India and China where renewable electricity certificates are at such a low price, they are beating the energy consumption from the grid. And it's just letting suppliers know and understanding that actually it could work out commercially better for them to move to renewable certificates. Things like lightweighting the product. If you take material out, it's going to save you carbon, it's going to save you cost. And we're seeing in lots of other countries, can you believe even America, where you get tax credits, so for investing in green technology. So there are, of course, routes that you go down that will take some investment and might be an increase in cost, but there are huge amounts of opportunities, the low-hanging fruit, if you like, where people can have a win-win situation by reducing their carbon. It's not always going to be an on-cost for the things that you do.
Yes, yeah, I love it, Ben. Jean-Marie, we have another question. Thank you, Daniel, for being so prolific and for engaging with us. If cost and carbon move in opposite directions, how should supply chain leaders be judged on their decisions?
So first, I completely agree with Ben that it doesn't always go in opposite directions. So in many cases, you reduce your cost by having less material, by having using less energy at the factory and then in the whole supply chain. You also reduce the risk, right, of having, if you have a big increase in energy prices or material prices, than if you use less of it, or if you have solar panels on your roof, then you don't have to purchase this from the grid, and then you're also a bit more resilient and safe from any big negative surprise. But then if that really sometimes go in opposite directions, indeed, I don't know. I mean, I'm a sustainability person rather than a supply chain person, to be honest. So I don't exactly know how all these criteria are embedded also in the in the way supply chain leaders are evaluated. But I think, yeah, it could be tricky in some cases. Yes.
It is, yes. As a supply chain expert, I can also say it's really hard to convince suppliers, especially from countries, from emerging countries, to invest in greener energy, in alternative fuel, in moving to a train, a truck instead of trucks. So it's really, 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 and even to take trainings on human rights. Some of the suppliers from emerging countries, they don't have these basics in place because they don't have the luxury to train people. They just deliver work, work, work. So just training suppliers, it's really, really difficult. If we go into the second topic, strengthening collaboration across suppliers to enable climate conscious decisions. And all of you mentioned about how important it is to work collaboratively with suppliers. So and Sophie, you mentioned about collaboration, about having contracts with additional, giving them, rewarding suppliers with additional business, having incentives in the contracts if the KPIs are there. But how do we strengthen this, collaboration for continuous improvement? Sophie.
I think the important thing is to celebrate progress. So even the small wins, I think again in your QBRs, in your regular touch points, if we're making progress, call it out. People love to see that journey. I think that's really important. I think supporting on that training, you were saying again around people may not have the resources or the capability or whatever that may be. Again, what support can you offer? How, if you are set up in a more resource heavy environment, what resource can be provided as well to support? I think going back to what we were saying before around the shared accountability, making sure that it's a shared accountability and it truly is a shared accountability. And it's about capability building. This is never going to be perfect. We're trying to achieve something that is moving the needle. So those things don't come easily. So how can we improve capabilities? How can we improve visibility? How can we keep on moving forward? There almost isn't an end goal. So you're not trying to get to somewhere and then, okay, right, done. It's not a once and done type of exercise. So how do we change people's mindset? And I think for me that's really important of that mindset and bringing people along on that with you and people wanting to continually improve.
Exactly, Sophie. I love this changing mindsets, and I think this is what impactful leadership is all about. Ben, in your experience across industries, can you give us some examples of strengthening collaboration across suppliers?
Yeah, so I can give a couple. So when I was with Haleon, I represented. There's a big industry group called the Consumer Goods Forum, where all of the big blue chip companies that provide consumer goods are part of, and they had a towards net zero working group, and this had retailers on, manufacturers of branded products through to suppliers as well. And I think just getting all of those people in the same room, first of all, virtually or in person, is a good thing. And a lot of standardizing, as we said before, the ask that was put to suppliers, because people are getting sort of mixed messages in terms of, I need you to set a science-based target. No, you don't need to set a science-based target, but you need to provide me this. So that standardization, just getting people together in the room, because coming from a company that was a supplier to retailers like Walmart in the US or Tesco's in the UK and others, even those guys were asking us for different things and to report onto different things. So we wanted standardization there, but just having that type of group putting together, they had some great focus areas on providing a guidance platform. Sophie touched on this, suppliers, large or small, need support. This is quite a new and emerging topic, I would say. The science is changing all the time. The opportunities are changing. Providing that clarity to those suppliers is really, really key. So I think lots of industry groups you look at together for sustainability, which is the chemical group that has done huge things in the chemical sector, as well as many, many others, is really key to drive the same industry message, because a lot of, the same industry will have the very same suppliers beneath them. And then the only other example I have is, great collaborations, again, to support suppliers. So being part of the pharmaceutical industry, they launched a program called Energize, supported by Schneider Electric. And this was the opportunity not only for suppliers to sign up for free, and it provides them training on carbon reductions, emissions, etc. But the biggest thing was also they could put forward their energy demands, and that could be pooled to be able to put towards long-term virtual power purchase agreements, which smaller suppliers with their own very small demands of energy would not have been able to get the cost competitiveness of some of the deals that are being put forward. So that's really where collaboration comes to life and provides that investment in renewable electricity.
I love it. I love the examples. We have a question for you, Jean-Marie. From Sabrina, how can a solution like Amphori BEPI be leveraged to accurately track, manage, and reduce carbon emissions across a company's entire supply chain, including upstream suppliers and subcontractors?
So yeah, Amphori BEPI, for the one who do not know the name or the acronym, it's the environmental solution we have in Amphori. So many people know Amphori BSCI, the social audit program, and this is a bit the little brother on the environmental side. And yeah, I mean, what we try to do is to help members massify the collection of data from their suppliers. And interestingly, what I heard from also my other two co-panelists is a lot of collaboration between buyers and suppliers. So also giving them capacity building, giving them the right tools. So I hope API is one of the good tools that we can provide for this, much more than enhancing or fueling collaboration between suppliers, because that's always a bit tricky. I mean, these companies are often competitors. They sometimes don't want to collaborate, or at least they're a bit uncomfortable collaborating sometimes. So it's a bit tricky, but I think it still really could bring a lot of benefits. Like you see sometimes good stories of industrial parks mutualizing some energy, like creating some steam together, or like the woman factory getting the leftovers of the neighboring factory. All this should really be enhanced. And that's collaboration. And even then, usually it's not so easy, because then it's also like companies having to do things they're not used to do. But still, it brings a lot of benefits, and it's also really reducing the waste of energy or steam or whatever that you really have often in industrial parks or around companies in general.
Thank you, Jean-Marie. I think companies are becoming very innovative in driving this collaboration, because I agree with you. There is competition amongst suppliers. And of course, some of them, depending on industries, are really, really closed up, and they don't want to disclose more. And you need to be very innovative as a company. And I worked with a client and they launched an event around suppliers, so rewarding suppliers. And that event, the theme was all around sustainability. So, and it was, they did it in a way that it's, if you join us and you come on the red carpet, it's because we believe in you, that you will invest in being more sustainable and more ethical. And I loved it, because you could see that event really drove engagement and rewarding, and also training suppliers on the basics and on the expectations of the company. Applying practical strategies. Thank you So before we go into the third topic, I want to thank you also for lots of questions, lots of engagement. We love it. Um, Applying practical strategies to improve energy efficiency and reduce carbon intensity. Any thoughts, Sophie, from your experience on practical strategies?
I think for me, it's about you're not trying to change the world. There are really small things that you can do which have a huge impact. So, like Ben was saying before, reducing your weight of your product, whether that's through packaging, whether that's small changes that you can make to the physical product, whatever it might be, those small things really do add up. And I think sometimes people try to look for these huge initiatives and they're going to cost loads of money and it's going to take loads of investment. Well, actually, no, it doesn't. If you take those really small changes, can you change the lights in your office so they're more efficient? Can you maybe introduce some sort of green vehicles and electric vehicles and things like that into your fleet, like you said before, from about going from road to rail? Those things are really tangible, really easy to implement, and of course, changing things takes a bit of time, but they don't need to be these multi-million pound investments. If you start to do those small things, you then get the ball rolling, and then it's easier then to start to continue to make those changes. So for me, it's focused on the small things. What can you do now, which will have an impact? And then continuing that mindset, like you said, and bringing people along, and you start to then see the benefits. And I think that that's the most important thing is it doesn't have to be huge. It can be really small.
It can be really small and it can be consistent because
Exactly.
change happens being consistent, and we call it in procurement broken record. You keep repeating and repeating, you keep training, you keep, reviewing suppliers based on how they deliver against sustainable goals. Ben, any examples from your experience on applying practical strategies to improve energy efficiency and reduce carbon intensity?
Yeah, I mean, just to follow on from what Sophie said, I completely agree as well. And you've got to do things that are within your control. Sometimes it can feel, oh my goodness, you get the results back of your carbon footprint, and you think you've got to reduce everything by next year. But there are things that you need to push to much later in your plan. I mean, air travel, whether it's your own employees or part of your logistics, look, there's progress being made, but zero emissions aeroplanes is going to take a long time to come. I don't have any control over that. So that's kind of got to be pushed into your 2030s, 2040s sort of plan. But things like, reducing your packaging, moving from air to road or rail, working with your suppliers to invest in renewable electricity in countries that have it and it's beneficial to you, are all things. So you've got to go after the things that are really practical and that you actually have some control over. And this is why you have a plan. No one's setting a net zero target within a year. This is going to take time, because these are, wicked changes that we're making right across the supply chain. But a couple of things. One sort of practical example, and it goes back, I think, to one of the questions around incentives as well. Haleon and actually the team, kudos to Chris Lowe and the team that leads sustainable procurement there, actually rolled out carbon pricing within tenders. So, the theory of this was we were seeing from our retailers that we were selling to that they were incentivizing more sustainable products, whether that's increased shelf space or competitive pricing, things like this. So it was felt that this should be passed down to our suppliers, and it was a way to incentivize suppliers that have made the effort to go on the energy transition, and it was putting a price on carbon as part of the total price that they were offering for products and services. So this is not very common across the market, but more and more companies are starting to pick up on this. So that's one practical example that we worked on. And then I think the only other thing is, just getting really close to your key strategic important suppliers. Don't think that you've got all the answers. Sometimes all it takes is saying to your supplier, where are we causing waste or increased carbon emissions? And they may say, well, if you didn't buy this same material in 8 different sizes of bag and didn't send it one bag on one trailer, etc., etc. Sometimes your suppliers have all the answers for you. It's just giving them the space and the opportunity to tell you where you're potentially causing the carbon emissions to increase.
Thank you, Ben. Thank you. Jean-Marie, any examples of practical strategies?
Yeah, I mean, what we do with Amphori API that was mentioned before is really to focus on emissions linked to energy use at factories. So this is the scope that we have, which makes the solutions quite limited in number, I would say, which is either working on energy efficiency, as it was mentioned several times, or Ben, you mentioned the energy transition. So like moving away from fossils and then going to renewables. And we realized that by just putting some metrics, like giving some metrics to the factories and also to their buyers through dashboards, and then showing, for example, what is the percentage of renewable energy overall used on site. I mean, this is something that maybe some sites know already, at least the one that are advanced and maybe already have solar panels, for example, and others I think don't know. And then I just checked before the show tonight, out of all the data we collected since the beginning of the year when we started to have this metric, we have an average of, I think, around 35% of renewable energy used at factories. But that goes from 0.07%, I think, from an Indian, no, Chinese site, I think, now that's using a little bit of electricity from the grids, but mostly a huge amount of gas oil. And then up to 95% for another site that is having solar panels, buying a little bit from the grid on top of this, but nearly nothing. Of course, for that last site, the transition is done. I mean, they have 5% of fossil still, but this is kind of over. So they need to work on energy efficiency. For the first one, the first lever, the obvious lever is that they should try to have a little greener and a little bit greener electricity energy types.
Thank you, Jean-Marie. As I said, this is a master class. Experts sharing nuggets of expertise. Thank you for the questions. Thank you for your contribution. I would like to thank you all and also congratulate our winner, Daniel. Sorry if I don't pronounce it correctly, Mielk. This is coming your way. Congratulations for winning the Supply Chain Talk mug. Thank you for joining and thank you for addressing so many questions. Before we wrap up, I would like to invite you to address one closing thought and one action item for the audience in the new year on how supply chain can drive and harness better climate progress through data. One closing thought, Sophie.
I think you've consistently come back to the point that supplier collaboration is the number one. 80% of the success will happen with your suppliers. So the action for me would be just reach out, ask the simple question of, like Ben said, what can we do that you may already know that we're not doing? Or how can we help you? So just start with the conversation, bring it up, make it a regular occurrence, and I think you'll be surprised at how quickly action gets taken.
Thank you, Sophie. Ben, your closing thought and action item, please.
Yeah, I think I think the main thing would just be make a commitment. It's the first stage. If we go back to a science-based target, when people make a commitment, you have a couple of years after that to set your exact goals. But making a commitment is the first thing because it starts to light the match under everything to get moving. And there are, we talked a lot about data measurement that shouldn't get in the way of the obvious things that we know, that a transition to renewable energies, reducing waste, reducing, increasing operational efficiency, all of these things we might not be able to measure it exactly, but we know it's going to be a reduced footprint versus everything else. So get moving on those key things to reduce carbon, and the benefits will come.
Thank you, Ben. Jean-Marie, your closing thought and action item.
Yes, I mean, I really think that in the past few years, a lot of data was collected. So maybe it's not perfect data. Maybe we can really improve the quality of it in the future. But there is a lot of data. There is a lot of knowledge of what goes maybe wrong. So now I really hope that more action will be taken. Now that things are visible, it can also be improved. And that's really also a call to action for factories or to factories to like act on these levers that were mentioned before, but also, of course, buyers, retailers, brands to continue really focusing on this and then supporting their supply chain partners in doing this progress.
Perfect. Yeah, I love supplier collaboration, make a commitment and use the data, act on it, and focus on collaboration. This is beautiful. I would like to thank our audience on here, on LinkedIn, for the engagement, for being with us this year. It's been a roller coaster. So many experts, so many guests coming over and over again because this talk show delivers quality, delivers breaking news in supply chain, and helps leaders improve their actions. So I would like to thank you and to invite you. We will take a festive break, and I would like to invite you on joining us again in January on 28th of January, the same time, 4 p.m. UK time, on the next episode, how demand forecasting can help you beat waste, bad goods. So thank you, stay safe, and a happy new year.